All right, we're going to wire up this button here, this new post button, to show a modal that's got a form inside of it, so we can submit a new post in a modal and close the modal after and validate and yada, yada, yada. Let's do it. So in our show posts blade view, here's this button, this new post button that currently does nothing. Let's make it open a modal. So we'll do what we've been doing. We have our dialog blade component here. Put that there. Okay, so now we have in the button, we have this new post. And if we reload the page, we should have a modal when we hit new post, and we do. All right, so let's fill this with a form. I have a bunch of boilerplate here. And so pretty simple. I don't even have a form tag. I wanted to just keep it as boilerplatey as possible. So it's just a div with some text and then two input elements, title and content. So let's look at that. Okay, we have our form. We have some sample validation, styling, and the inputs. Let's add the two buttons. So I'm going to steal that footer that we used in our delete modal. So we'll take that footer, put it right here. Okay, and we don't want any of this stuff. Whoops, so let's get rid of this. We'll leave type button, and we don't want red this time. We want blue for the confirmation. So this is gonna say, and it also says delete right now. We'll say save for add a new post, I guess. And then the cancel button is fine. So let's see what that looks like. Okay, we have cancel, and we have save, which does nothing. Let's also get rid of this close button because we're not going to need that for this form. So if we hit save, it should just do nothing, and then cancel will cancel. Okay. We have this div. Let's turn this into a form tag, and now we can actually do something. Of course, we're going to add wire submit and do all that stuff. We'll get there in a second, but I want to show you one really crazy thing that boggled my mind on this screencast for so long. And it's so stupid. And I've told you this before, but this type button, oh, it's so important to add type button to buttons that aren't submit buttons. So this one is actually going to be a submit button inside of a form tag. But just so you understand how this works, if there's no type on a button, the browser assumes it's a submit button. And when it's pressed, if there's a form tag above it, it will submit that form. So if it's a submit button, I just say, just anytime you have a button, always add a type. This is a submit button. When we press it, it's going to submit this form. This is a close button, but it doesn't have a type on it. So if you leave this type out, check out this crazy thing that happens. If I just hit enter in this title field, it closes the dialog. What's happening here? Why is that happening? When I press the enter key on this input, it triggers a submission by looking for the first button inside of the form tag, which is this button, and then it fakes a press, which I guess also translates into a click, which gets caught here and sets open to fall. Oh my gosh, this took me so long. So I just wanted to hammer this home, because if this took me a while to figure it out, and I freaking made the thing, so it definitely could catch you up. So add your type buttons. Okay. So we have type button. Now it's just going to work as expected. We hit enter in title and nothing. Oh my gosh, it did something. I don't know why it did that thing, because it hit submit. Oh, you know what it did? It actually submitted the full form because we're not using LiveWire with the form yet. So, okay, that's what we would expect. All right, so we have our form. Let's wire it up in the back end. I'm going to go to back end mode for a second, and then we'll go back into front end mode in a minute. But right now we have this delete function. Let's make a new function called add. And then here is where we're going to, you would think to do something like this. Post create, like this, validate, post create, and then inside here, title, and then this title, and then content, this content, and then create two public variables called title, maybe set it to an empty string, and then this is content, empty string, and then wire model to this title and content, and then make your form submission, call this add. So this is like LiveWire 101 when you're making a form in LiveWire. And this is fine, but I don't quite love it because we have a show posts component here, and it's we have this, all of this stuff has to do just with that add post modal, which I don't love, because maybe we'll have edit post modals in each row, and then we're going to need new properties and new methods for that. And it's just going to feel like it gets out of hand. These are scenarios where you might think to nest the component, to create a nested add post component. And we might do that in the next screencast, but that's a lot of extra. Again, like in general, I say start by don't reach for nesting Livewire components right away. Don't just reach to create this, because I've warned you before, there's lots of ins and outs with nested Livewire components. You have to deal with communicating back and forth that a new post was added, so now you can refresh the list. It's just whatever. So for these cases, there's a new nice little abstraction in Livewire 3 called form objects. So let's create a form object, artisan Livewire form, and this is going to be create post form. Okay, so it just created our create post form, and just to show you where this lives, it's in app Livewire forms create post. And now in here, let me open that in a separate window. Okay, so here you can actually take all of this and put it inside. So now this has the title property, this has content, and this has our add method. Let's turn this into a save method. We need to import post, that post model, so app models post, okay? And there we go. So now we're validating inside here. We're creating the post inside here. This feels really good to me. And then here we could say public create post, import that, and we'll just call this form, okay? Because we know it's a form object. We're still going to need a method on this root here to call from our form. So we'll say save, and then we can just forward that. This form arrow save. And let's actually call this add so that they're different names. I kind of like that. Like this parent, this show posts has an add button. So that should be kind of mapped to the add method. It has a delete button that's mapped to delete. And then this create post, I don't know, you can name it whatever you want, but we're just kind of forwarding the logic. We're basically deferring everything to do with creating the post into that form object. Okay, so that's form objects. We've wired up the back end. Let's wire up the front end. So we go into our show posts. We deal with our ridiculous level of nesting, unfortunately. And here we have our button panel, and there's our form. So here we could say wire submit, and then we're going to call that add method here, and that's going to call form save. And then these inputs we want to wire model. So we'll do wire model title here, and then text area is going to be wire model content. So now those two fields are wired up. The only thing left is validation. So, well, actually, I just made a mistake. This is probably a common mistake you're going to make. I referenced title, but there's no title property. Title's inside form now. So we have to type form.title and form.content. And it's going to be the same with validation. So for these validation messages, let's do this. Error and form.title. I'll change the other one to content in a second. And then here, instead of just some random placeholder, we'll echo out message. This is just part of Laravel's @error syntax, and then end error. Okay, and so we have form.title. Let's do form.content down here. We have our cancel button, and we have our submit button. It's type submit. So when the user presses this button or hits enter on any of these input fields, it's going to turn into a form submission here. Call add our post, and that'll be that. So let's see if it works. Let's hit new post. We'll say some new post, and let's just hit enter right now to see the validation work. Okay, so it didn't work because we didn't add any validation, and it's telling us right now, it's saying show post doesn't have any rules, but we're trying to validate. So let's go inside create post and add some validation. There's a few different ways you could do this. You could say title is this or is like required or something. You can do it inside there, but my preferred method, when I can use it, this won't work for every validation case, is these rule objects that come shipped with Livewire. So you can just add that rule attribute above it. We'll just say required, and maybe the title will make minimum 3, and then the post you can have as much or as little content as you want. Okay, so we have some validation now. Let's try this out. We hit new post. Let's just hit enter and see there's our validation, some new post. Hit enter again. We're validating that the content field is required. So we'll say some content. Okay. Now let's hit save. Okay. It saved, but it didn't close our modal and it didn't clear our input, but it did add it as a new row. So we're kind of halfway there. To clear the input, let's do this. We'll just say title equals empty string, or actually, if you'd prefer, you could say reset title and content. And let's make sure that works. So if we hit new post, we add some dummy data, we hit save. Okay, it cleared the input and it added the new post, but we need to close the modal now. And there's a few different ways to do this, but if you recall, I think the cleanest way, if it's a single modal, would be to wire model this entire modal. So wire model, we'll say show add post dialog. Okay, and then here, let's add a public variable called show add post dialog, and this is going to be false by default. And then when you press the open button, that's going to turn to true. Then when we go to submit, after we save, we can close that dialog. And I like doing this in here rather than putting it inside the posts thing, because this is kind of an outside concern. You could reuse create post if you had an entire page dedicated to adding a post, you could use this exact form object and reuse all that logic and validation and not have to worry about this add or this, toggling the modal. That definitely feels like something that's concerned with this component. So show add post dialog, set it back to false after we add the post. And again, if you'd prefer, you can use this reset syntax, and that's gonna reset that back to its original value. All right, so let's test this out. Let's see if we're in business. We say some new post, and here's some new post content. Okay, and then we hit that save. It closed, and it added our new post. It's everything we wanted. So this is perfect. This is everything we need in a simple form modal. There's one thing that I want to just add really quick, a little like quality of life thing. When you hit new post, it autofocuses the close button because that's the first focusable thing in this modal. Let's instead focus the first input. So if we add autofocus right here, now when we open the post, it autofocuses this title field for us so the user can just start typing, hey there, some content, and then save that, and then we're good to go. Okay, so that's nice. We have a nice, clean, new post modal. It saves our state, of course, because it's just a single post. If the person cancels out and then they go, oops, I accidentally hit escape. I hope I don't have to rewrite my post. It's all still there for you. So that's that. I'll see you in the next video.